Welcome to the 95th episode of Minnesota Outdoor Skills and Stewardship, or MOS as we like to call it. And today we've got a special guest, my coworker here in the Region 2 office, the Senior Assistant Wildlife Manager. And Don, why don't you tell the folks a little bit about yourself?
Okay, thanks for the intro, Craig. I am Don Plattner. I currently work out of the Grand Rapids area office with wildlife here. I started with the DNR about 16 years ago and have bounced around the state a little bit, trying to stay north of Highway 10 at a minimum. So I'm currently in Grand Rapids, across the hallway from Craig. So I'm here this afternoon to give a presentation on shed antler hunting basics.
Okay, with that, I'm going to turn my camera off and you have the stage. Enjoy yourself. Have a good show.
Okay. Welcome everyone. Again, like I said, my name is Don Plattner. I work in the Grand Rapids office. I am by no means a extreme shed antler hunter. I'm pretty novice, so I'm just going to give you some basics today. If you're new to the sport, if you've started and you've done some shed hunting on your own, but you want to get to know more about it, I'm still learning as well. So let's get started. So an overview today, we're going to cover just what is shed hunting, some laws, ethics, and stewardship around the sport, when to go shed hunting, and we're going to focus on Minnesota today when we're talking about, when to go, where to go, some of the laws and ethics around it, what to bring shed hunting, and then we're going to go a little bit into our whitetail deer, elk, and moose, which are the three species you'd probably be shed hunting for in Minnesota. And then next steps and some helpful links. So to begin, what is shed hunting? And this question, I guess it depends on who you ask. A couple years back, I was talking to one of my sister-in-laws about taking some time off to go shed hunting, and she thought I was going to be driving around for a week looking for the shed on the left side of your screen here. While I was actually talking about shed hunting in the woods looking for dropped antlers. So again, it depends on who you're talking to. I, by any means, would enjoy both types of shed hunting. But today we're going to stick to talking about antlers. So what is shed hunting? Generally, it's just hunting for antlers that are shed annually. What are antlers? So if you're new to the sport, antlers are extensions of an animal's skull. They're found in members of our deer family, Cervidae. So again, in Minnesota, we got the white-tailed deer, the elk, the moose. Historically, we had woodland caribou as well. Antlers are made up of calcium and phosphorus. And if you can see the screen here, I apologize, it might be a little small, but in general, just to give you an idea of the antler shedding cycle for members of the deer family. Typically, deer they'll start growing their antlers in the spring. I don't know if you can see my pointer. They're going to be covered in velvet as they grow throughout the summer. That's to protect them and to supply them blood as they grow and develop. As we move into late summer, early fall, you'll see here they'll start to shed the velvet and the antlers will start to harden. That's preparing for the rut. Antlers are used to display during the rut season for fighting. So I'm sure folks are aware of that if you've seen videos or if you maybe have family members who hunt and you've seen, broken tines on deer. Some of those injuries can come from fighting during the rut. And then following the rut, the deer don't they don't need the antlers for the rest of the winter. They take a lot of resources to carry, so they will drop them in mid to late winter. And then the process will start again in the spring. So again, big difference between antlers and horns. So a lot of times you'll hear folks talk about horns and antlers kind of in the same sentence. They are very different. Antlers are shed and regrown annually every year. Horns continue to grow throughout the life cycle of an animal. There are some exceptions with antelope and pronghorn, which will shed the sheath around a horn on an annual basis, but in general, they will carry horns throughout their life. So you're talking about bighorn sheep, for example. Antlers are bone, and horns are made of keratin, kind of like our fingernails. So today, as we go through the presentation, we're going to focus on white-tailed deer, elk, and moose. Again, those are the three species in the deer family that we would typically be out shed hunting for in our neck of the woods. Historically, woodland caribou did roam the northern regions of Minnesota. So these slides might be a little boring, but I think it's important to get into the laws, ethics, and stewardship around the sport. It's a very fast-growing sport, and not everyone's aware of what the regulations currently are in Minnesota. So Minnesota Statute 97B.22, collecting antler sheds, a person may take and possess naturally shed antlers without a license. A person may not place, arrange, or set equipment in a manner that is likely to artificially pull, sever, or otherwise cause antlers of live deer, moose, elk, or caribou to be shed or removed. So that is essentially an antler trap. If you look at the photo on the bottom here, this is just one version that's posted all over. I found this on Pinterest actually. So this is one version of an antler trap. You'll see a lot of fence versions. Essentially, they're just they're made to catch the antlers as deer are feeding. And because we have a feeding ban in a lot of the state, these typically shouldn't be in your yard already, so you wouldn't have to worry about it. But that is a statute based around shed hunting. If we get into more specifics, scientific and natural areas in Minnesota, it is not legal to collect shed antlers. And this is right from our DNR website. We must leave plants, animals, rocks, and other natural elements, including shed deer antlers, in place to fulfill their life cycle and role in the environment. And I apologize if the writing is a little small here. I'm going to add some of these links at the end. I just wanted to run through all the different recreational areas and public spots we might be looking for antlers, so you know the rules. State parks and forest recreation areas, shed hunting is not allowed, and that is Rule 6100.0900, and it's explained in subparts 1 and 2, and that link will be available in the chat at the end. State forests, it is okay to collect berries, mushrooms, or other items for personal use while in a state forest. So that's including antlers. It's allowed in national forests, so Superior National Forest and Chippewa National Forest in Minnesota, and on our county lands. On wildlife management areas, shed antlers may be collected for personal use, and on private lands, always be respectful and ask permission prior to going on private lands. This is read out of our 2022 Minnesota Hunting and Trapping Regulations booklet, storage, possession, and sale. So a person may possess, transport, buy, or sell these parts of lawfully taken game animals, except for migratory game birds, which cannot be bought or sold. So bones, including skulls, hooves, antlers, and that goes on. And then skulls of game animals, including deer skulls with antlers attached, which we call deadheads. You can see an example in the photo here. Deadheads may not be possessed without a permit unless they were lawfully taken. And what that means is if you legally harvest an animal during a hunting season, you don't need a special permit because you have your license already to possess that. If you find one of these when you're out shed hunting, call your local conservation officer and get a permit, and you can take that home with you. You just need to have a permit to possess it. Continuing, we have with National Park Service. So up at Voyagers, shed hunting is not allowed. It's not allowed on the national wildlife refuges or Fish and Wildlife refuges. And then I wanted to show some examples here of other states and some regulations that you'll see if you travel and shed hunt elsewhere. I don't shed hunt in a lot of different states. I know friends who do. So some states that have regulations, and this is not an exhaustive list by any means. But Colorado, Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, Oregon, South Dakota, Arizona, New Mexico, West Virginia, and there are others if you do some searching online. I highlighted West Virginia here because it is illegal in West Virginia to collect shed antlers. So it's not legal at all. So be sure if you're traveling out of state or even in state, check on the regulations before you head out into the field, and then you won't have to worry about it. Some of the regulations these other states have include dates to protect animals during the winter when they're already stressed and they're trying to utilize minimal resources and make it through the winter. We'll talk about that later today as well, because that is going to be a concern in Minnesota in certain parts of the state. A lot of these states just require a free ethics course. It doesn't cost anything. It's just a permit to say you took a course before you go out shed hunting. Some states have limitations on ATV or off-road access into areas, which Minnesota would too, depending on the type of public land you're going to access. It's illegal to use antler traps, as we discussed previously in a lot of states. And then some wintering areas are closed for all use in some of these states. And I did want to mention, I thought this was neat when I was putting the presentation together. I found that Wyoming, so it's generally illegal to shed hunt on national wildlife refuges, but they have an exception on Wyoming's National Elk Refuge. There's a local Boy Scout district that helps the staff collect antlers, and then they sell them on an annual basis for a fundraiser. So I thought that was kind of a neat exception. Back to timing and winter survival, especially in northern Minnesota. This is a big concern. We have had some extreme winters in Minnesota. If you're in the northern reaches of the state, deer already have a hard time surviving winter. It depends on our snow depth. It depends on the extent, how long our winter goes, what the snow crust, predators in the area, how long our spring is drawn out, how deep our snow is, how cold the winter is. So we don't need added stress on our animals. So if you are in areas of the state where deer congregate in the winter and what we typically call wintering grounds, just stay out of those areas. Allow them to stay there to save the resources. Don't bump them. They might not come back if you bump them, and then actually you'd be making your chance of finding antlers in the spring a little bit more difficult if you start chasing them out of their habitat in the winter. So that's an important one. There's a lot of information to back that, and you'll find a lot of states out west just don't allow it. So they have a timeline on when you can and cannot be shed hunting in wintering grounds. Respect other wildlife when you're out. You're going to run into other critters in the woods. If it's spring, be careful with other, bears or moose or fawns and everything that's going to be running around. So just be respectful while you're in the woods. Pack out your garbage. That bothers me when I go shed hunting and I'm carrying other people's garbage out of the woods, especially if they're in there shed hunting. They're planning on packing pounds and pounds of antlers out, but they can't pick up a wrapper and haul it out with them. So keep that in mind. Maintaining control of your dog. So I have a dog who accompanies me in the woods. She is not, I never specifically trained her to shed hunt. She does go, she will pick up antlers if she feels like it. But she does go with me, and I have control of her all the time. So she's got an e-collar. I keep a bell on her. I always have a leash along. And then certain areas have rules too. So our wildlife management areas, for example, between April 16th and July 14th, you have to have your dog on a leash, and that's for nesting birds. So, and there again, if you're out in the spring shed hunting, you're going to run into a lot of ground nesting birds in the woods, and you want to be respectful of them as well. And be considerate to others in the woods. You know, share the space. We're all out there to have a good time. You're going to run into people. You know, you're going to walk miles back and see other people's snow tracks and whatnot. But just try to, you know, give everyone their space and be considerate. So when to go shed hunting? Again, we talked about timing. So late winter is a good time to shed hunt, depending on, again, where you're at in the state. If you're in the northern portions of Minnesota where we have, you know, the harsh winters, be really careful about that and where you decide to go. But spring and fall are also great times to go shed hunting. So I typically go in the spring, April, May, and then I'll go again in the fall when all the leaves have fallen off. Try to go before the competition with the other critters. So mice, chipmunks, squirrels, porcupines, you know, coyotes, wolves, bears, they will all chew on antlers. It's like a multivitamin for these critters. It's a, you know, it's a perfect source of calcium and other nutrients that they require. So you're gonna find sheds, even brown sheds of the year, which were sheds that were dropped that year, that are chewed on. It happens. So try to get out there before they get out. And then safety considerations when you're shed hunting. You know, other recreational users. You might be out shed hunting during certain hunting seasons in the state, so make sure you've got orange on. If you're out in the fall and you're beating around the brush, making a lot of noise in moose country, you might actually attract a bull moose. So be careful. I always have a bell on. Make sure that the animals know you are a human and not another animal. I always have items in my backpack to get my dog out of, you know, if she were to run into some type of a trap, because there's a bunch of different users and we just have to be cognizant and share the woods with everyone. So just be prepared for whatever you might run into. Where to look for sheds? This is, you know, this is kind of, there's a wide variety of areas to talk about when, you know, talking about where, you know, where to look. So basic, you know, you want to look on the feeding areas and their bedding areas and around water resources. So some feeding areas, you know, agricultural fields, depending on what part of the state you're in, agricultural fields, food plots that people might have out, winter browse areas, recent cuts, old burnovers that have started to grow back, bedding areas, dense conifer, you know, snow, wind shelter, lone and single conifers that are scattered out through browse areas or on the south facing edge or slopes or edges of a stand or an area that you're shed hunting at, you know, like little knolls above, you know, like ridges or knolls or little raised areas, heavy brush, swamps, the list kind of goes on. Near water sources, I found this antler here right on the edge of a lake. I almost didn't see it, but it could have been crossing, you know, in the winter when there was ice or laying on the edge. But so check near water sources, check travel corridors, game trails. You see this picture here. Hope you found a match set on a trail here. So riparian corridors, power line corridors, check near obstacles, you know, anywhere an animal is going to have to jump, you know, to maneuver. So fence lines, rivers, creeks, big trees that are across trails, check areas where they're, you know, jostling their head or jumping around. What to bring shed hunting. So this is another one of those, it's a pretty exhaustive list, but it could be as long or short really as you want. And as you go over time, you're going to develop your own list and decide some of the stuff you don't need. You might decide you want additional items that are not on the list. And you'll decide what type of gear works for you. So backpack, I just use a little backpack that is clearly not made to carry antlers, but I tried a frame pack a couple times and I don't like trying to move through the brush with it on. But frame packs are great if you're going to be out in open country. So backpack, you know, ropes, bungee cord, something, ratchet straps to attach the antlers that you find to your pack, proper footwear, and sometimes numerous pairs of footwear. You'll see this one photo on the left. I had my knee boots with that day. I typically bring, you know, if I wear knee boots, or I'll bring my hiking boots, or one or the other. Sometimes I bring waders, but I'll stash them in the woods, you know, if I'm using them to get to certain areas. Duct tape. I have duct tape wrapped around various water bottles. I bring it everywhere when I'm hiking. If you start to get a hot spot on your foot, duct tape can work wonders to minimize blisters later on. So layers, you know, any other sport we do outside Minnesota in the spring or fall, the weather can change significantly in a day. So I bring lots of layers. I bring rain gear, blaze orange if it's, you know, if there's an open hunting season. Food and water for the day. I also bring a water filter along with me in case I run out of water. Then I have a backup if I can find a water source near, which I can typically find in the spring wherever I'm out shed hunting. First aid supplies, and that's for you and, you know, if you have your dog with. Food for your dog, water, bells. You can see this picture of Tika. There's a bell circled on her collar. And either she's wearing it or I'm wearing it. And that's every time I'm in the woods. And that's not just for shed hunting. That's just general practice if I'm out for work even. So I don't have a accidental run-in with a critter. I don't want to startle a critter in the woods. So one of us is always wearing that. And then bug, tick, and sun protection. Plenty of bugs and ticks out throughout the year, so be prepared for them as well. Some more items here that I bring along. So compass, and you'll see I've got this old school Silva Ranger. I've had that compass for, I don't know, 25 years. I am still old school. I bring my compass. I do bring other technology along, but I trust that having compass is nice to have. There are parts of the state where a compass is not going to be extremely useful. Parts of the Northeast where it's just going to spin circles on you. But so I bring a variety of items. I bring, you know, if you want to bring a compass, GPS, bring maps, mapping or tracking apps that are usable offline. So just some examples here of maps you can look at for habitat options. So Google Earth is on the bottom left. Over here is an example of some maps you can find on Google Earth. This one up on the top is our DNR Recreation Compass. You can go on our DNR website, look up Recreation Compass, and get some useful maps from there. There's also a Venza, which I don't have shown here. That's an option. I like to use offline tracking apps as well. So when I'm out of service, I can track this bottom right picture here. You can see, you can do this with your GPS too, but I like the more detail to show where I've been. So if I come back to the spot another day, I don't walk the same areas. Phone, mainly for photos these days, or if you're going to be in an area where you have reception. Radios, if you're out with another person, sometimes the two-way radios are nice to communicate and make plans about when to meet back at the vehicle or wherever you started from. Extra batteries or power bank. I bring, you know, something similar to this one shown here that charges, it'll charge my phone, you know, like 4 or 5 times, like to a full charge again. So, because when you're running around all day utilizing maps, it tends to wear your battery down, especially if you have an old phone like I do. So I use that quite frequently. And then binoculars and eye protection. I always wear sunglasses, and everybody's got their preference. I like to use some polarized lenses. I feel like things pop out and it's easier to see them a little better in the woods. But also I tend to walk into a lot of thick stuff and and they've probably saved my eyes a few times. Okay, so now we're going to get into some certain species in Minnesota that you might be looking for. I apologize, this deer permit area map is a little blurry. I'm just realizing that now. But so deer in Minnesota, historically, the majority of deer in Minnesota were in central and southern Minnesota, because remember, we had moose and woodland caribou in the northern portions of the state, as well as elk. So once woodland caribou started to move north and elk and moose started to shift a little bit, deer have, generally speaking today, I mean, they're everywhere. So if you're looking for areas to go, there's a lot of resources out there for, where to find higher populations of deer. You might know locally where they overwinter and just wait till they're out of there to go check it in the spring. This map here, if you're familiar with some of our stuff on our website, the areas of green and red would be the higher populated areas. The areas blue and that cream color and brown would be lower populations. And then the purple areas here are the southeast, where we have a lot of the CWD management zones where you can take additional deer. But just one resource, there's plenty of resources online. Generally speaking, and there's a lot of variety to this, so don't quote me on any of this. But generally speaking, in Minnesota, deer are going to drop their antlers in mid to late winter. So it could be December through early March. Younger ones can hold them longer. Older ones might drop them earlier. It depends on their nutrition, their age, their diet, if they have any injuries. So there's a lot of variability in that, but that's a general timeline. A variety of food and browse. Deer eat a lot of different things on the landscape, both, natural, artificially planted, and then agricultural crops as well. So this is not a complete list by any means, but some examples of what to look for if you're looking for feeding areas. So cedar, white pine, balsam fir, maples, oaks, acorns, aspen, birch, mountain maple, mountain ash, jack pine, dogwoods, other shrubs, corn, soybeans, grasses, and the list goes on. Our estimated Minnesota white-tailed deer population is between 600 to 800,000. So there are plenty of antlers on the ground out there. You just need to decide where you want to go and go start looking for some of them. Moving to elk, Minnesota's native elk were originally distributed over most of the state, but were functionally extirpated by the early 1900s due to overharvest and loss of habitat. So now we have our current elk range is in northwestern Minnesota, and it's primarily in 3 localized herds that are like spread out in 2 areas. So down here in the southeast, we have the Grigla herd. Sorry about that. And then this population up here, we've got the Caribou Vita and the Kitson Central herds. So the Caribou Vita herd goes back and forth between the US and Canada. So, but this is where the elk in Minnesota generally are located for the range. We certainly have elk across other portions of the state. We do have a page on our website where you can report elk sightings. So this is just the range maps where we currently, still do surveys on an annual basis, but you'll certainly find them in other areas of the state. So basically take this with a grain of salt. And if you want to focus where most of them are located, this would be a good idea. Otherwise, you can check out our information online and look at where folks have been reporting them. Elk typically drop their antlers between January and April. So they're going to be the latest. If you're going to spread out and try to shed hunt for all 3 species in the state, you could probably wait, till late spring to go look for elk antlers. But yeah, they're January all the way through April. They utilize the open brushlands and grasslands, woodlands of the aspen parklands in northwest Minnesota. They prefer, grasses, forbs. They'll eat willow, aspen. Unfortunately, a lot of agricultural crops that the locals have to deal with. But there are some, there's some really large tracts of public land in the Northwest. So again, lots of options for shed hunting elk in Minnesota. These are just some habitat pictures just to kind of show you where you would maybe look for them. You got, this aspen. This is like a typical aspen parklands, like an opening here in the woods. A lot of swamp. You'll see a lot of swampland when you're looking out there. And then just some evidence of bull activity. Moving on to moose. So the maps here on the bottom kind of show historically where moose have been throughout the state. So historically we had moose and elk and woodland caribou in the northern portions of the state. So moose and elk kind of shared the western area, and the woodland caribou and moose were in the northeast. And then as elk disappeared and caribou moved into Canada, moose kind of filled those two voids. So we had the northwest population and the northeast. Now if you look at this map on the far right here, the bottom right, that dark shaded area, that is what we consider primary moose range in Minnesota now. And then the light shaded area, certainly they still are found there. It's just not what we consider their primary range anymore. Minnesota's moose population estimate from last year was between basically 3,400 animals and 6,700 animals. And then moose are typically dropping their antlers in December and January. Again, a wide variety of browse that these critters enjoy. These are just a couple examples. They do eat a wide variety of shrubs, woody plants, and aquatic vegetation. So we got aspen, mountain ash, red osier dogwood, balsam fir, just to show a few examples. And here's some pictures of moose habitat that you might encounter when you're out shed hunting. You can see this picture on the left. This was pretty late in the spring when I finally got out, but there's an antler out in the middle of the swamp there that was chewed on a little bit. But yeah, just find their feeding areas, find their bedding areas, and start searching those spots. So again, next steps and helpful links. I think we were going to put some of these in the chat following the talk. I don't belong to a lot of outside groups. I have friends who belong to outside groups, so just continue learning, try to meet other shed hunters, plan a trip, start looking at maps. There's a North American Shed Hunters Club, and Joe Shed also has a lot of great information on his Go Shed Hunting website. There's a Minnesota Official Measures website, which is kind of neat. That will show, like the top antlers. It's got a category for shed antlers as well. So it's interesting to check out. And if you just search shed hunting in Minnesota online, you'll come up with all sorts of Facebook and YouTube videos and helpful links. So, and articles and news, everything you can imagine, you can find just doing a simple search. And then some of the stuff on the right here, these are just links to some of the statutes in Minnesota we spoke about earlier, some of the rules, and then our Minnesota DNR main page that also has information there about all three species we talked about today. And then that bottom link, it says contact the Minnesota DNR. If you're shed hunting and you have got questions for folks, conservation officer, you're not sure what the rules are, go ahead and call the DNR information center and try to get your question answered, or they will get you in touch with someone who can answer it. And with that, have fun, get out with some friends, find some sheds. It's great exercise. I would not say I'm the most successful shed hunter all the time, but I just enjoy being in the woods. It's fun to get outside and see other stuff out there as well. So thank you for joining us this afternoon, and I'll take questions. I think I need to, thanks.
Nice job, Don. I went and looked around my office and I found
Oh, look
a
at
moose
that.
shed. So
Nice.
it's got the bleach side and the brown side. And the reason
Perfect.
for that is the brown side was laying down and was protected from the sunlight, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and that bleaching, you'll see, I forgot to mention that. If you go out west, which I have not done, but a lot of folks out there, you'll see bleaching of the elk antlers, or depending on which side your antler is laying. Yep, in the sun. I've got a bunch that are really dark on the bottom side if they're laying down, and the white side, the upside is pretty bleached, unless it was covered by leaves. So nice antler. You were hiding that one. I didn't see it over there.
Yeah, it sits back on the shelf. Um, my best whitetail, I found them. Well, I can't say that I found them. I have a match 10 pointer that
Nice.
my Springer Spaniel, we were out putting in a trail to a deer stand, and he walked over and sat down, apparently bored with what we were doing. And there's a nice antler laying there. And it's like, oh, wow, we found an antler. And I told him, I said, now, if you can find the other set, you can ride in the front of the truck on the way home tonight. And he walked about maybe 20 yards, sat down next to the matched pair. And
Nice.
they were both chewed on a little bit, but it was a lot of fun to get out there and look for those. And sadly, we found a few deadheads
Mhm.
on the property, and we usually go over there and look probably Marchish. We get out and find a few things that, and I think what's happened is they've been hit by a car and they get 100 yards into the woods and on that travel corridor that they use, and that's kind of where they make it. And we have a lot of coyotes and whatnot that clean everything up, and
Mhm.
so it's always a little competition when the wife and I go out and look. She came back with her 6 point. It was a deadhead, but she was really excited about it. And then I had my 10 pointer behind my back, and I said, "Oh, I found this little one too," And so we go back and forth.
Nice.
Um, we got a question from Mark, and Mark says, if I were to do a BWCA trip for moose antlers, how much effort would you expect it to take to find one on an average, of course?
Um, it depends on, I think a lot of it has to do with your work prior to picking a spot and going out in the woods. So, I mean, I've gone out for 4 days and not, found a brown antler.
Mhm.
I'll find old ones and leave a lot out there, but I think a lot of it has to do with um, your work prior to going out, and then if you get into an area before someone else has been there. And if you get into an area and you're hitting all these spots that look amazing and you're not finding anything old or new, then you can probably assume someone has been there, and I would try a new spot. Um, the year we had COVID and we weren't allowed to go into a lot of the national forests or boundary waters or just areas overnight. And man, I bounced all over the place during the days and had a lot of spots picked out and had to cross a lot of them off because people had already, been in those areas. So I would just get a couple options and check them out. Like elk, for example, I'm not great at elk shed hunting. It took me 46 hours to find my first elk antler, and I found the match set, but
Oh my goodness.
yeah, it's they're the only two I have, Craig. But I also don't live in that part of the state, so I kind of have to bounce around if I want to go for elk or moose.
It's interesting, and I think we talked about it during the practice session a little bit, but you can do a lot of preseason scouting with even our direct compass works really good, where you can go in and look at aerial photos and try to pick out some likely spots I just got a message here. I want to remind everybody, please use the Q&A because it's much easier to navigate for us. We had a question here. What's the best way to train your dog to hunt sheds?
That's something I forgot to touch on. So again, Tika is not trained necessarily. She's my first dog. My dad told us growing up that we didn't have a big enough yard for dogs. I don't know. Somehow he convinced all three of his kids that we didn't need a dog growing up. So I didn't get my first dog until I was in my late 30s. And I
Mhm.
had a friend at the time who had a lab who had stabbed its eye out with an antler, shed hunting. So he had suggested I don't train her for that, which was fine with me. She doesn't chew on the ones at my house, but there's antler training DVDs and books out there, and basically the kit comes with like a soft antler and almost like a stick, where the antlers have been ground down and made into almost like a glue stick that you can use as a
Mhm.
scent, and
Mhm.
then just start hiding them. I mean, I hide my antlers around the house in the winter for Tika just as a fun game, and she'll pick them up in the woods, but she is by no means, gonna sit by one and bark at me, or she'll carry it around until she's bored. If I haven't noticed it, she's just gonna drop it and go do something else. But there's all kinds of information online. I am not the best resource for training dogs since I've only had one. So
So we've been giving our new Springer, and for those listeners that have talked to me, and we got an 11-week-old Springer Spaniel pup now, and he is just a bundle of joy. We gave him a spike with a brow tine as his first official chew toy, and he loves the thing to death. He will gnaw on it for hours. But it's getting him to start looking for that. And I'll look at him. I say, "Where's your bone?" And he'll go patrolling around the house till he finds his bone, his antler. Um, my plan for this spring would be to take him out with uh, the one that he's been using, because that's got his scent on it, of course, and maybe plant a couple of the other deadheads that I have, and just see if we can get him interested in finding those. There is not a scent, to my knowledge, that you can uh, go ahead and um, put on something to get him to find the scent. Um, Amber's gonna post a poll for us, or one of the guys, and you guys can answer a few questions there. Um, we got a comment here from Gail, and she said she's a real novice. Where do you go? And isn't most land in Minnesota private? We have thousands and thousands of acres of public land in Minnesota, and that recreation compass will help find areas where you can go. Plat books will tell you ownership of land that you can search on, so you can check on those too. So let's get back to the Q&A section here. And Azalea wants to know, is there a season to wait? Is there a reason to wait for spring to shed antler hunt, simply not to bump wild animals from their beds? I watched an older buck drop both antlers on trail camera just last week. Azalea, if you can tell me where the trail camera was, I'll go out and take a look and see if it's okay to go pick those up. But what do you think, Don?
I think no, if you're in areas, if you live down in farm country, where there's, well, this year we do have a lot of snow down there, but if you're in areas where there's minimal snow and there's a lot of available food resources throughout the winter, and deer don't need to necessarily, concentrate in their wintering, historical wintering grounds to survive, then I don't see anything, wrong with checking some of your agricultural fields. You're going to be able to see the deer out there. Maybe avoid those areas closer to the evening when they might be out, eating. Um, I used to go snowshoe once in a while in the winter, and again, I just pick my spots, right? But yeah, if you have deer running around that have already shed antlers and it doesn't seem like you're going to be bumping or stressing them out, then I don't see it as a problem. The only reason to maybe wait would be if there's a bunch more deer utilizing the same areas. The longer you wait, if you wait a little bit longer, you might get a few more to drop, and then you'll find more when you go into those areas.
You mentioned a key part there about, strapping on a pair of snowshoes, and up here in Grand Rapids, it's one of our recreational winter exercise activities to put on a pair of snowshoes, and we put trails around our property and enjoy that. But to go and find an antler that's fallen into, 2 feet of snow that we have up here, you might see one sitting on top of the snow, but chances are they've slid down into the depth of the snow, and you're not going to see them until that snow melts. My favorite time to go is during that spring melt off, when the snow is nice and crusty, the ground underneath is still froze, so you're not up to your hips in muck and water and whatnot. And I usually just find a deer trail, and I'll follow that deer trail from the point that it enters my property until it leaves my property. And then I'll turn around and I'll find a new trail and work my way back across. And that's been pretty good because they like to use that wintering area. There's a lot of black spruce back there, so they got a little winter thermal cover, and they'll come out into the field or the brush line along the field edge and feed. So that's why I wait until March. The snow is usually a little bit harder. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's, if you can walk on top of the snow, right, even better yet. Plus, if you wait to that point where we have that, intermix of snow and open ground, you can tell if other folks have been in there. It's easier
Right.
to see if there's boot prints. And then, and a lot of times too, I hear folks snowmobiling throughout the winter who will pick them up on the snowmobile trails, or, groomers will find them. Because again, like Craig just mentioned, a lot of our animals like to utilize those corridors that we make, or, those snowpack
Mhm.
areas for traveling. So yeah, I have not been lucky enough to find one on a snowmobile trail, but I do know a number of folks who have. So, but no, I agree with you, Craig. That's a good time of the year to wait till.
So, Andrea's got a question in here. And do button bucks drop antlers? At what age or at what antler length do they start shedding their first or their antlers? And so a little bit of biology, I guess. A button buck is got the pedestal or the base to where the antler is going to grow, and it's probably not much bigger than my knuckle on my thumb, and it's fur covered, and it'll stay that way until he starts to grow his first set of antlers. And then the horn will erupt through that and continue to grow. I've got a buck that I shot with my bow a few years ago that they were about 2 7/8 inches long. It wouldn't have been a legal deer to harvest with my rifle, but because I was using archery equipment, um, any deer was legal, and I had to register it as a antlerless male because it was so small. And that 2 7/8 inch antler, I don't know how anybody would ever find one that small. I mean, it would get lost in the forest litter pretty quick. So
Those are the
you,
good ones. If you can find the spikes, those spike antlers out on the land. I've only found a couple, but yeah, that's if you can see those, you can see anything on the
yeah,
ground in the woods.
the bigger ones show up real easy
Yeah, those are a
compared
little
to
easier to find.
something that's just that long.
Mhm.
So let's go back to our questions here. If you find a deadhead in the woods, are you able to take it and then contact the CO, or do you need to contact the CO prior to removing it?
That depends on your relationship with your local conservation officer. I would say 9 times out of 10, you might be in an area. Well, I guess it depends on where you live. If you're in an area with no reception, certainly take, at least get back to where you have reception or to your vehicle and make that phone call. There's that 800 number that was going to be posted if you can't get a hold of if you don't know your local conservation officer, you can call the DNR information line and they can get you in touch with someone who is who's working that day. Or you can leave a message and your address and phone number to have a call back. So I would trust, to take, if you can get a text out to a CO if you know one. It's just so that you don't have that in possession, without a permit saying where you got it, especially with moose deadheads right now. We don't have a season, so unless you harvested a moose, prior to the season closing, you're going to want a permit to bring that home with you.
I just seen something jump up in the chat here. Our friend Mark Spoden typed in that there's a difference between antlers and horns, and he might have got on a little bit late, but you did cover that very well. And I guess I'm an old deer hunter, and I will transfer them back and forth. But it's like scrapes and rubs.
Mm-hmm.
I had a buddy that would find rubs on the ground and
scrapes
on the trees. Yeah. Brian posted a link to Antlers scent. So apparently somebody has figured that out. I've never seen it myself, but it's apparently out there.
It does come, with that kit you can get for your dog to start them out. Yep, it's in the stuff I've seen is it's almost like a glue stick, where you could rub it on. Or you could maybe make your own at home. I have not tried that. The fresh antlers, she seems to find them around the house a lot easier. Probably just a scent than some of the old ones. Same as, if I pull some wings out of the freezer, I have a scent. A lot of folks who duck hunt or grouse hunt probably have the scent that you can dab on them to give them a little bit more. So thanks for the link.
Gordy, he said he's from southeast Minnesota. Do deer drop antlers earlier or later in the season from central to northern Minnesota?
So it depends, again, like their diet. So I would, not being from southern Minnesota, but knowing that they have more food available down there, I would think that you're going to start to see, but the rut is different too. So I guess you could start down there searching because the snow is probably going to melt earlier. And it depends on the age of the animals too. So that might not be a great question for me to answer. That might be a better question for someone who does more shed hunting in that area. But in general, I would say that they'd probably hold them I would think they'd hold them longer because of the nutritional availability of food down there. So that would be my thought.
It's not controlled by
photoperiod too, and testosterone and all that. So you got to consider, when the rut ends, because once the rut ends and the photoperiod changes, that's when they start to go into the process of dropping. So there's a lot of different factors involved. I mean, I've seen moose drop up here during deer season, because of health concerns. I've seen deer with antlers on, into March. So April, like the end of April, when you'd think they should be starting to grow a new set of antlers. So I think there's such variability in that. That might be a good question to go online and jump on one of the forums or blogs and maybe talk to local folks and see what they're seeing.
Our friend Benji said to mention the dog training webinar that we did a while back, probably 3 weeks ago or so. But the presenter there talked about, her name was Tina Dock, and she talked about how she trained her pup to look for antlers. So if you guys get a chance, you can go back and check that. I know that one's up on the line because I've watched it a few times myself with the new puppy. Is there a cost to the deadhead permit?
No, they're free. It'd just be like a salvage tag. So if you were to come across, like a deer carcass, for example, that you wanted to keep, they would write you a salvage permit for that. And this would be similar to that, just be a permit to have that deadhead in possession.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Looks like we've got all the Q&A stuff answered. Let me just run through the chat here to see if we got anything that we missed in the chat. There's a lot of stuff in there today, and it gets really cluttered up. That's why we have you guys use the Q&A to put that in. I think we got them all.
What were the poll, like oh, there we go. The results for the poll.
Okay, so did you find it?
Yep. So we asked, do you want to go through them, Craig, or should I go
Sure.
through these,
If you
Craig?
can see them, you can go ahead. You can
Yep.
go through them.
So question number 1, have you ever been antler shed hunting before? We had 25 out of 111 who said no. So about half and half. 50% didn't really answer, 58%, and then we had the other half were split between yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
If you have been shed hunting, what species have you targeted? And then we got 3% elk, 5% moose, and then I can't see the
20 out of 100.
20 out of 100 here. So, and then 83 out of 111, no answer. I can't to read all the questions here. Last second.
Have you ever traveled?
Oh, there you go.
We didn't get anybody to fill those in. Oh, northern Minnesota was probably the most popular. And then I don't see anything for the areas or the other question that was there.
Nobody wants to share the areas they're gonna start shed hunting in this.
And all of the sheds that I've looked for lately have been on our private 25-acre parcel, but it's fun just to get out. I mean, we've been cooped up for a couple months by then, December and January. I mean, with all the snow we've got, but it's been very enjoyable to get out and just be outdoors. February, I probably won't start looking until March, and then we'll go out and do our annual antler search behind the house there. So we're 1 minute before 1 o'clock. Don, thank you so much for coming in. I think everybody learned quite a bit, and you did an awesome job.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate everyone tuning in, and have fun and let us know, what, I don't know, is there a way they can let us know how their first shed hunting experience goes, but reach out to me, or if you have questions, and if I can't answer them, I certainly have plenty of friends who shed hunt who could probably answer them for you. So.
And if you end up getting a hold of me, literally Don is what, 20 feet across the hall.
Yeah, I'm right across the hall.
So we didn't know how to do the 2 mics on one camera. We could have sat in the same office. So thank you again, Cassie or Amber, if you can turn off the recording and move us into the back room, that would be awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.